Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in today. We are a day late. So today is Friday. I'm Nicole Forbes and you are watching Dennis's 70s class on backyard berry growing. This is a topic that really everybody should be interested in, because if you find yourself at the grocery store on a regular basis getting fresh or frozen berries to add to desserts or breakfasts or smoothies, you could be going out into your backyard on a daily basis through the harvest season and picking your own berries. And of course, most of these berries also freeze or preserve beautifully, and so the supply could be as close by as your own freezer or cupboard when it comes to the off season. Growing your own berries here in the Pacific Northwest is really something that we take for granted because of some of the climatic advantages that we have. A mild temperature, a mild winter, even though we've had some ups and downs this season, a mild winter and a mild summer, and lots of rain. So of course all of those make for happy plants that grow really well. In addition, today we're going to talk about strawberries, blueberries, and raspberries in most detail. And I'm also going to talk about a huckleberry that is one of our native plants. But those are our three basic berries that we find as some of the easiest, most popular, and most willing to grow in abundance here in the Northwest. So beginning with blueberries, there's no particular order, but maybe alphabetical. So beginning with blueberries, blueberries, one of the reasons that they thrive in our climate specifically is they like a ample supply of moisture. Blueberries have a very shallow, very fibrous root system rather than a big taproot that goes deep down into the soil. Blueberries' roots stay pretty close to the surface and create kind of a thin, wiry network that is vulnerable to changes in moisture level that's in that kind of, top layer of soil. So blueberries prefer the acidic soil conditions that most of the Pacific Northwest kind of native soil is an acidic pH. It's always a good idea when you are starting any of these berry crops to do a basic soil test. And if you watch any of my classes, you know that it is one of the things that we highly suggest, even just a simple home test that you can take and do yourself. This test here gives you multiple opportunities to retest the same areas and check nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium levels, as well as the general pH of your soil, or alkaline, or even closer to neutral. The pH of the soil, without going into too much soil nerdiness, which I love to do, and if anybody wants to learn about a soil class, give me a yes to soil class and we'll book one into the future. But the pH of soil also creates a different availability of nutrients within the soil. So it's kind of soil chemistry. In acid soil, there are less nutrients available, but maybe more trace minerals, for example. And the fungal, the probiotics, the microbial population is also affected by pH in the soil. So in a more acidic soil condition, there may be more fungal microbes dominant, and then as we get more neutral or alkaline, more bacterial microbes dominant. So the plants that prefer associations with different soils also prefer to grow in those conditions due to the microbial population that it favors and the nutrients that are available to those plants. Blueberries prefer to be on the acidic side of the pH scale, and really if we were looking for kind of a number range, they would like to be in that 4.5 to 5.5 pH. Now 7 would be neutral, so that's fairly acidic. Our native soil is known to be slightly acidic, so in many cases it may be necessary to add either sulfur Cottonseed meal is another organic acidifier, or Dennis 70s carries a soil blend that is a pH balanced or pH acidic soil blend that can be planted, either put into containers and planted directly into, or mixed into your native soil, or even used as a mulch to help acidify and create the right conditions pH-wise for blueberries. Blueberries, one of the things about blueberries is that there are some really ideal planting times for blueberries, and those would be in fall or early spring. So we are approaching early spring just within a matter of days. We will be at the vernal equinox, which is very exciting. But this would be one of the, at this time of year, this would be the best time to plant blueberries. I have a lovely assortment of blueberries. I can put my arms around here, and you can see the range of blueberries that look just like bare sticks right now. Here I have Blue Crop. This is Chandler. This is Duke up front. So 3 high bush blueberries. And then you see that we have blueberries here that have foliage already on them. This one here, kind of a reddish leaf, and then another blueberry here that has lots of leaves on and lots of flower buds emerging. These are considered half high. So this one here is Legacy, and Legacy actually is still a high bush blueberry, but this is Sunshine Blue, which is of the Bushel and Berry series, kind of a newer series. Sunshine Blue is a half high blueberry, and also semi-evergreen. So let me just back up for a second to what those all mean. High bush blueberries, such as Blue Crop, Chandler, Duke, grow 5 to 7 feet tall, have kind of a vase-shaped habit to themselves. These blueberries are the large bushes that you walk along, and of course, you know, if you ever go to a U-pick and pick blueberries, you may be standing at eye level and picking blueberries off of tall plants. Those would be northern high bush or high bush blueberries. 5 to 7 feet tall. These berries can also go on and on in yield. So the plants can live for 30 or 40 years, and they can remain productive for that same amount of time. So you can have lots and lots of blueberries for many, many years from your labor in planting in the initial, with that initial bit of work. Now, high bush blueberries versus low bush blueberries. Now, low bush blueberries are between 18 inches and 2 feet tall or so. The half highs are a cross between the two. So, Sunshine Blue here, which has been on the market for a good 10, 12 years, or maybe even a little bit more. The half high nature of this makes it about 3 to 4 feet tall and wide, so a nice rounded bush. And because of that shorter, rounder habit, this is also a blueberry that is able to be grown in containers. So something as large as a high bush you probably wouldn't find suitable for long-term container growth, but the Sunshine Blue and other half-high hybrids can be grown in containers and still harvest a lot of blueberries from them. So in addition, of course, you see the difference between these high bush are that they are fully deciduous, dropping all of their leaves in fall. Now, they are bare sticked now, and you can see even a few differences between the plants. We have kind of a yellow, almost a pea green yellow twig appearance of Blue Crop. And then Chandler here is a little bit more of a peachy coppery color on the stems. And then when we get to Duke here, the stems are even darker, kind of a burgundy or maroon color. So the plants are pretty in the winter with kind of different colored stems and twigs. Also gorgeous fall color before all these leaves dropped in the fall. Beautiful reds and oranges and yellows before all their leaves drop. So blueberries are definitely known for great fall color. And then, of course, something that keeps its leaves year-round, such as the bountiful blue or sunshine blue, it ends up being more of landscape value because many of us prefer to look at things with leaves in our landscape. So this plant can even be used as just something ornamental that ends up also benefiting us with fruits later on. So you don't necessarily have to like relegate your blueberries to the food area of your garden and then have your ornamental landscape closer to the house. This will look just gorgeous right out the back in its own container or in its own little blueberry patch. And keeping it closer to the house, well, of course, that means that you're that much more likely to go out on a regular basis and harvest and snack on those berries. So everybody wins in that case. When it comes to partnering or pairing up your blueberries prefer to have more than one variety planted together, not in the same hole, but at least when you're looking to buy blueberries, it is suggested that you purchase 2 plants of 2 different varieties. So that means we could do a blue crop and a Chandler, or a blue crop and a sunshine blue, for example, or any combination of these. There's not, if you've studied fruit tree pollination or any of the other more kind of complex pollinators, in many cases there are kind of more appropriate matches in the pollination world, but blueberries really can all pollinate one another. The blueberry itself is self-fertile, which means that one blueberry can go ahead and make blueberries with the help of some pollinators. However, 2 different types of blueberries can almost triple the blueberry production between the 2 of them, and that's just because each blueberry will not only enhance the blueberry, its companion blueberry, but it will also have more berries on its own, and that's due to the benefit of cross-pollination between the 2 different varieties. Now, in addition to that, the range of ripening from different varieties of blueberries includes what we would call early season, mid-season, and late season ripening periods. Now, in my neighborhood, we have had a long-standing blueberry contest to see who can produce a regulation-sized, it's a Philadelphia cream cheese container full of blueberries. Has to be full enough that the lid doesn't exactly go on. That's a full container. And whoever delivers the first full container to the other neighbors is the winner. And that contest is usually won by the first week of July. And my winning blueberry for several years has been Duke, and that is this lovely little blueberry here. Duke is one of our early season fruiting berries. It gives us, again, as I mentioned, could be late June or early July, definitely blueberries by the 4th of July, which is a really fun, target date to know that you're eating blueberries on the 4th of July. And Duke is also a little bit of a unique blueberry in that it fruits early, but its flowers come out a little late. So its flowers come out and it makes a fruit pretty quickly. And a delayed flowering on an early crop is preferred when we have dicey, kind of continued cold temperatures into spring. So the later the flower blooms in the spring, the more chances that we'll skip frost and cold temperatures that might damage the bud, and also that the flower will be open at the time when there are more pollinators out in warmer weather, so that we, as we learned about last week, can assure that it's getting pollinated as well. So Duke is first week of July, let's say, and that's an early season. Mid-season, blue crop is a good example of a mid-season fruiting blueberry. And blue crop, let's say more like late July, early August, we'll have the opportunity to start picking blueberries off of blue crop. The next would be a late season ripening blueberry, and an example of that is Chandler, which I have here, although there are many. We probably have at least 10 different varieties of blueberries at our garden centers right now. So you can, buy 10 and you'll have all kinds of great variety. But I at least suggest 3. Chandler is a mid to late season bearer, so we could be towards late August and even into early September eating Chandler. Chandler is an exceptional blueberry in that it grows a large berry. I have seen an exceptionally large Chandler berry that I would easily have mistaken for a cherry had it been the wrong color, had it not been the wrong color. So Chandler can grow large berries almost to the size of a cherry, whereas Duke and Blue Crop are smaller berry, a little bit more common like we find in our grocery stores. Now, the opportunity to plant blueberries, as I mentioned, ideally is while they're still somewhat dormant, not quite yet in bloom, and certainly not necessarily when they're fruiting. If you wait a little later in the season and you're buying blueberries when they are further along in their season, while they are making flowers or even producing fruit, the best thing that you can do is take a little bit of pressure off of this, basically pregnant plant so that it can focus on its own foundations before it tries to support a family. And most of us can, that's a reasonable expectation for any organism. The blueberry plant really wants to make blueberries. It will, if we let it keep all of the flowers that it has and we try to plant it, the plant will try to put all its energy into ripening those berries at the expense of putting energy into establishing a nice healthy root system. So this is why we would prefer to plant them when they're not kind of baby crazy and thinking about making blueberries, so that they can make that nice root network, because as I mentioned in the beginning, it doesn't go very deep. The blueberry roots are vulnerable to drought. They are definitely not a drought tolerant plant. And we need to get them established as quick as possible in mild conditions, so that as the summer warms and gets drier, that's right at the period where they're ripening those berries. So we need them to have those extra resources in the ground as much as possible. If you come along later in the season and you're planting a blueberry that is in full bloom, it's a really hard thing to do, but I'm going to tell you still, and then you can follow, hear what I say and ignore it or whatever. But what we talk about is disbudding. And disbudding means removing flower buds. And removing flower buds means taking away future berries this year. But remember, this plant could be with you for 30 to 40 years. So skipping or reducing its first year harvest in hopes that that produces a better established plant is not too bad of a trade-off to think about having a plant that's going to then provide for you for many years. So you can see big fat buds at the tips of the plant. I can already kind of see little flower buds developing at the tips here. So these would be future flower buds. And if I were to plant this as it's further in bloom, I would just pull off about at least 30 to 50% of the flower buds. So I could take one here, here, here. So you're just reducing the load on the plant so that it will have some blueberries, but it's not going to produce quite as many blueberries this year, and that's going to give it a chance to produce a better root system for the future. Now, blueberries are also not terribly heavy feeders. As I mentioned in the beginning, as long as you are aware of soil pH and keep your blueberry plantings in that 4.5, 5.5 range, the natural elements and trace minerals that are available really suit their palate in most cases. It's fine to give them a light fertilizer for acid-loving plants, and believe it or not, this is an organic fertilizer, 452 for rhododendrons, azaleas, and camellias. But being that it is organic, this is a perfect food to give your blueberries as well, and it's just for acid-loving plants. So you can kind of share this with some of your other ornamentals if you've got some rhodies and azaleas. As they're kind of waking up this spring, that's a fine time to give them a nice little wake-up fertilizing. So as you see them leafing out, a little dose of the azalea camellia fertilizer. And towards late fall, a nice application of kelp meal is really all they need to kind of get them through the winter. And often kelp meal is used for helping stabilize plants through times of stress. So they can handle cold temperatures better, they get stronger cells and thicker stems, able to withstand ice storms and things that may be coming through the winter. So a nice dose of kelp meal to kind of put them to bed in fall is really about all the blueberries need for nutrition. And because those roots are so shallow and close to the surface, a top layer of mulch over the root zone in a nice ample ring around the base of the plant is going to help insulate the roots and contain the soil moisture, reducing evaporation. So now what we have here are at least 2 or 3 year old blueberries in most cases. This would be, for example, a 2 and a 3-year-old here. And by year 3, you should begin pruning on the blueberries. So pruning on blueberries is best done in late winter. So February is a great time to prune blueberries. Wouldn't be bad if you haven't pruned them yet to go out and prune the blueberries that you have. The idea of pruning blueberries is a balance between producing fruit for this year and producing fruiting canes or fruiting bud areas that will produce fruit in years to come. So you want a nice shaped plant. You want to encourage new growth that will then produce fruit on that new growth into the future. They typically are flowering on at least 2nd-year-old wood, which is why you would want at least a 2-year-old blueberry, since that's going to give you a 2-year-old wood that has the opportunity to produce flower buds on. And then by year 3, you can begin doing some winter pruning. And what you will notice on the blueberry is some distinctive colors of the stems. All of the newest growth is colorful and smooth. So there's no rough, grainy bark or any kind of woody texture to them. They're kind of light. This one, as I mentioned, is kind of a pea green color and very smooth. But you will also see older stems that are now rough in texture and have developed even almost a shaggy bark that I can feel. I can feel that rough bark and texture, and we can see the older wood and where it transitions to newer wood or newer growth. Now, by year 3, you can begin to remove some of the oldest wood. Also focus on crossing branches, so branches that kind of come up and begin to grow into the plant center. Ideally, we would be creating a plant that's sort of open in the center. That allows more sun to shine into the center of the plant and ripen more of the berries as well. So older, woodier canes can be pruned, rubbing branches can be pruned, and also very thin, essentially weak, thin wood can also be removed and pruned to favor thicker, more robust stems. Usually I kind of use a number 2 pencil is my gauge of stem thickness. A good stem is typically at least the diameter of a number 2 pencil. And so we can tell the difference between some really thin, wiry ones and those nice, big, thicker stems. Ideally, you're not pruning more than 25% of the plant in a single year. That means that as you're cutting on your plant, lay out your prunings. Don't stuff them in a can or throw them in a bucket. Pay attention to how much you're removing so you don't over prune. And realize that every year from here on out is another opportunity to continue to prune and shape your plant for years to come. Now, again, if you have no idea what I just said, or that does not help you in any way, I would go to the OSU, the Oregon State Extension website, and look at blueberry pruning. There are awesome videos and fabulous guides that are provided by our state extension agency and offered through the Master Gardener program to give you video instruction or illustrated guides to pruning blueberries. And if that's not enough, not to, self-promote too much, but you can hire me to come out to your garden. Genesis 70s, you'll find the information on our website, where I'm able to come to area gardens in the Portland metro area for an hour on-site consultation. So I'd be happy to walk you through the stages of blueberry pruning as well. I think that's enough of blueberries because I'm timing this and I've got 3 specific crops to talk about. So that's almost 30 minutes on blueberries. Already gonna have to shorten another one. So let's talk about strawberries for a second, because strawberries are lots of fun and everyone can grow strawberries as well. Where blueberries take a more specific garden pH, and blueberries can kind of best be grown in their own space because of that soil pH requirement that they have, strawberries have a lot more flexibility. They're a lot more kind of like all the other kids in the garden. And in my vegetable garden, I have kind of a strawberry patch on one side, and then I grow a lot of my other vegetables in another section, but really all kind of in the same area, treating the soil very much the same. In fact, even when it comes down to feeding my strawberries, they are fed the same thing as I give my tomatoes and vegetables and herbs, and they don't know any different. Just because there's no strawberry on the bag, I just don't show them the label, and they have no idea. It's perfect food for them. So when it comes to strawberry growing, again, there are different crop ripenings. So we have what would be called a spring crop. Sometimes that's referred to as a June berry. And then we have an ever-bearing crop, which is also sometimes referred to as day neutral, although technically everbearing and day neutral have slight differences that I'm not going to go into, but if you're listening and you know, I know too. So the spring crop spring crop strawberries, June bearing, as I mentioned, excuse me, one of the best known is hood. And hood berries are kind of like, I guess if you think of like Oregon strawberries, hoods are probably the one that most people think of. They're a large, very conical berry. They've got like a core, an inner core almost. So as you take the top off and the little stem, often it pulls out like a little section in the middle, so it's a little bit hollow. Hood berries hold up because of that kind of large size and that little cone, the cavity inside. They tend to hold up and they can ship okay, but they don't go very far. So they're best fresh. They're one of those that most of us, flock to the farmer's market for flats of strawberries so that you can make up some jam or have strawberry shortcake. That's what June berries kind of provide for you, is a significant harvest of berries over a 3-week period, for example. You have enough to pick and pick and pick and then have, something to make out of them. Now the other ripening season of strawberries are everbearing, also known as day neutral, and those strawberries tend to provide fewer at a time, but over a longer period, allowing you to go out and pick what I would call pocket berries. Don't put berries in your pocket, but you know what I mean, like a handful of berries while you're out in your garden, maybe pulling weeds or planting something else, or you're going out and doing your garden inspection. You can pick a handful of everbearing berries pretty much any day of the summer, although they do take a little bit of a break kind of during the most intense period, end of July, early August. Often my berries take a little break and then they ripen again, start giving me ripe berries again towards late August and early September. The range, again, of strawberries within those two ripening fields include different flavor, different size fruits. Some berries are a little bit tartar and better for cooking. Certain varieties of berries are better eaten fresh, whereas other varieties have more freezability or preservability. So depending on, again, what you want to do with your berries and how you want to grow them can help you make that selection. I often will suggest planting a combination of June-bearing as well as ever-bearing strawberries, which gives you enough at one time to have shortcake or a strawberry ice cream batch or something like that. Yet it also allows you to have a more constant crop of just a few berries to eat on a regular basis, to have for dessert or put into your smoothie. Those kinds of things where they're fresh and fresh eating as long as you're out doing regular picking. It's common this time of year to see strawberries not only available in 4-inch pots, what we recognize more directly as a potted berry. So this is quinault. Quinault is an everbearing, and we already have, you guys, we already have berries. So these flowers have already bloomed, they've dropped their petals, and now they have a tiny green cone-shaped center that is developing into a strawberry before our very eyes. So an everbearing quinault strawberry is already forming strawberries. And then I have, this is another one I'll talk about in a minute, but this is the crazy Hawaiian berry that is a white berry with red seeds. This berry not only is fragrant and smells really good, but it tastes like a cross between a strawberry and a pineapple, which is pretty cool. So between those potted berries, that's one way to buy them. But in early spring, you also have the opportunity to buy strawberries, basically bare root. So one of the things about early season, and we talk about this all the time, is that weather is dicey. We've got gorgeous sunny days like we've had yesterday and hopefully today, and then things can often take a turn and we can have dime-sized hail and temperatures in the low 30s again in March. And so it's a cautious time of year for us to put tender and vulnerable plants outside. Things like tomatoes and basil have a long ways before they're going to be comfortable out in the temperature of the soil and the air that we have. But strawberries are actually frost tolerant even when they're babies. So you don't have to worry about putting out vulnerable little young strawberry plants. They can go out now and not even necessarily be covered in bad weather. This is a pack of bare root strawberries that we have just put into soil to keep their roots healthy and moist. But I'm going to show you what you would do with this, because often people have these strawberry pots, whether you've got it from your mom or you brought it in a cool trip to Mexico, or you found one at a thrift store or a garage sale. Strawberry pots, or you bought one here at 70s. Strawberry pots are meant to have strawberries grown in these tiny little pockets, as well as strawberries out of the top. And then you wouldn't have to have strawberries in the ground. But as I showed you, this lovely little potted strawberry, which is often what you buy, doesn't fit in that hole, not even at all. And you could, if you had to, you could build soil up here and bring your strawberry plant through and plant it from inside, but that's really hard to do. And anyways, you're bringing your strawberry through a lot of stressful situations just in order to get that done. Instead, if you can buy them bare root, this is the best way to plant your strawberry pot. So if I take this out, come on, plastic, I'm trying to not make a mess. You're gonna have good dirt in here, so we're gonna take this out. And now I have all of my started strawberries. The roots we can even see. Oh, look at those beautiful roots. So we can even see down here the little bits of white. Do they come through on the camera? A little bit, yeah. So tiny little white, fresh white roots at the bottom of these roots, showing that the starts have been kept moist and the roots are already beginning to break dormancy and grow. So now our packs are 6 in a bundle, and sometimes you get 7, or sometimes you get 5, I suppose. But we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Different sizes, nice looking plants, and this is what you would use then to fill your strawberry pot with soil. Take one of these starts and pot it into each one of these little holes. There's 3, oops, 2, 3, 4 around the top, or sides. I could put 2 in the top, and that's now going to give us 6 strawberry plants that can grow and fill out this lovely container, giving us strawberries by this season, because this is a hoodberry. This is a June-bearing strawberry. So ideally this year we would actually pull off those early flowers and try to give it a little bit of a break so that it can get itself established before it begins making fruit for us. Now you could let it produce its own berries, but you need to give it a little bit extra protection and encourage some establishment, because as we know, just the burden of producing fruit can take a lot of energy from the plant's own ability to kind of get itself established. So you'll see, by the way, there is a handout and it's attached to the video here as kind of a link. You'll see when we talk about strawberries on the attachment that we do mention a couple of different ways to plant and help get your strawberries established. And there is a difference between the June-bearing and the ever-bearing strawberries in that we recommend that you try to pinch off some of those early season blossoms on the June-bearing to give them a chance to get established, whereas an ever-bearing will basically fruit for you a little bit later in the season, but none of them are going to be like huge producers in their first year, giving you more berries as they mature. In the ground though, I find that after 2, maybe 3 years, my strawberries begin to become less productive. And so I'm constantly adding, about every 2 years I'm adding another handful of strawberries to the strawberry bed. And that's a great opportunity to just kind of keep trying new varieties, or put in something else that you haven't had before, whether it's Rainier, Seascape, Quinault, Hoods. There's now the Hawaiian berry, there's Ozark Beauty. There are so many different strawberries out there that there's a lot that you can try, and some are, some you may even like better than others. When you plant from these little bare root plantings, you do want to wait for some obvious change, so to see some growth begin before you fertilize on your strawberry patch. But otherwise, if you have a more mature strawberry patch, you can go ahead and start giving them a little bit of your average basic vegetable food as you see, soil temperatures warming up and things beginning to grow. So right about now, this morning soil temperature was 38. So, I don't have peas in the ground yet, and things are kind of on the swing since we have had real warm weather. That was also a kind of cold night last night. So we're still right in that range where we're waiting for it to warm up and kind of stay there before we put in warm season crops and see a lot of things actively growing. Strawberries also are, the foliage doesn't seem to be so delicious to slugs. They wait for the berries. So slugs hang out in the strawberry patch. They know when the flowers come, how long it takes for them to fruit. They're like tucking in their little napkins and ready to feast. So it is important to also be out when you've got flowers forming to make sure that you are doing some vigilant slug protection, whether that is baiting them, snipping them in half, using beer traps. Slug Magic, or Sluggo, is our organic, non-toxic, well, non-toxic unless you're a slug, iron phosphate slug control that can be kind of either used as a perimeter. They smell it, they go to it, they eat it, and they go home and they die with a, they have great dreams and die a happy slug from slugs by using some form of slug control. The other thing you'll notice is as strawberries are developing, they're right on the ground. And as opposed to a blueberry where the berries are up in the air, well, up in the air you've got to protect them from birds usually and squirrels, and that's a whole nother bit. But on the ground, the berries sit directly on moist soil. And occasionally the berries sitting on moist soil and that ground contact can prematurely damage or even mold the berry. So we use a mulch usually to kind of break again that soil contact between the moist, wet dirt and the developing fruit itself. And the mulch could be wood chips, the mulch could be our soil building conditioner. It's just a little bit more fibrous, woody, and not quite so soil-like. What I actually like to use on my strawberry beds as a mulch is straw, and I have never really done any old-timey research to see if we call them strawberries because we use straw around them, but I've seen straw used a lot on strawberry beds, and so I'm going to stick with that. That's why we call them strawberries, is because they're mulched with straw. Prove me wrong. And from there, pests and diseases, I mean, that's it. I just talked about the slugs are going to be out there. So control them. Occasionally you have some birds and squirrels and things that get into your strawberry patch, but again, some netting, some creative mechanical controls can keep that from happening. And then you'll also see different varieties of strawberries have different, the different cultivars have different disease resistance or viral resistance to them as well. So if you have grown strawberries in the past and had a problem with your berry patch, you would definitely be wanting to replant with a disease-resistant or a virus-resistant berry. But if you're just starting from scratch, I would say you're not likely to have a disease or a problem as long as you work with best practices, grow them in the full sun, and again, keep some mulch and healthy soil conditions and healthy plants. The natural, at least in my mind, the natural companion in the garden with strawberries isn't actually a berry, but I had to bring it and show because we are blessed to be able to grow rhubarb here in the Pacific Northwest as well, and strawberries and rhubarb go hand in hand, at least they always have in my life. Strawberry rhubarb pie is one of those things that is just, it says spring. And this is a rhubarb plant. So we've got bare root starts of rhubarb as well at the garden center, just beginning to show its large, it's going to have a large, really green puckered or quilted leaf, gorgeous red or crimson stems. Now the leaves themselves we don't eat, they actually have some toxicity to them. It's the stems of the rhubarb that we eat. This rhubarb is beginning to form a flower. So we see a little round flower bud that's starting to come up from the center, and as that flower gets a little bit taller, and I'm certain that it is a flower, I'm going to just snap it off because we don't need rhubarb to flower. So if you have rhubarb at home and you see it begin to make a flower, just again, snip it off or snap it off. Typically we also try to let rhubarb grow its first year without harvesting it. So you would plant it this year and then begin harvesting it next year. But rhubarb is a great deal, and again, one of those plants that once you have it in your garden, you're going to have it for many, many years, be able to divide it, share with other people, and it's kind of a cool looking plant as it grows too. So I know it's not a berry, but I had to talk about it because when else are we going to talk about rhubarb? Now, finally, raspberries. Now, this is another of those half high bush blueberries that I forgot to mention. So we have, I have to give you a close-up of this one. This is Sunshine Blue, and this one is Bountiful Blue. Now, as I mentioned, not only are these shorter, semi-evergreen, they can be grown in containers. And look at the adorable flowers. So this Sunshine Blue has these pink flowers that as they open are going to become a really pale pink, almost white. But again, those early season pollinators like our mason bees that we talked about last week, they can fit right up inside this tiny little flower, grab all of the pollen, do a very efficient job of spreading that pollen from flower to flower, giving us that cross fertilization that we need. And believe it or not, a few of these flowers have already gone through that process, and I see the very beginning stage of developing blueberries right now, right here at my fingertip. So, it's kind of an exciting day today. We're all going to get vaccinated soon, and the sun is out, and blueberries and strawberries are forming, and there's some hope. At least I'm very hopeful, I'll say. So there's just that. Beyond that, again, so raspberries, my last thing to talk about. Raspberries are a cane berry. So, like you walk with a cane, right? Raspberries are a cane berry. Cane berries grow differently from the kind of ground cover, sort of seek out and spread on the low ground version of strawberry growth. We have more of a standard bush or shrub growth fashion of a blueberry that we're more familiar with. Cane berries are a little bit unique in how they grow, and that is that they will continually put new canes. So this is a cane. They will continually add new canes each season. Ultimately, if left uncontrolled, it would be a thicket of tons of canes coming up in the raspberry patch. However, again, there are two ripening times of raspberries, what we would call a spring crop, as well as an ever-bearing crop. So similar to our strawberries, spring crop, ever-bearing crop, and the same deal. More berries all at once for a spring crop, fewer berries over a longer period of time for the ever-bearing crop. I'm probably even holding, this is probably an ever-bearing. Yeah, sorry, ever-bearing, spring-bearing, doesn't matter. You don't know. But after 2 years, the cane that is 2 years old is the fruiting cane, and at the end of 2 years, it becomes unproductive or by far less productive. So typically, at the end of year 2, we cut that fruiting cane to the ground, and in the growing phase of the plant, it's sending up new canes. So at year 2, I take that down, but the last year's cane that was 1 will be 2 this year, will give me fruit, and then I cut that down. So the pruning after that second year on your raspberries allows you to reduce the thicket and keep a more open raspberry patch that is nonetheless continuing to be productive as well. Now, again, summer bearing or spring bearing versus ever bearing. This is Canby. Oh no, this is Heritage. Heritage is an ever bearing. I've got small kind of, I can feel them, small bumpy thorns on this cane, but they're not like cutting my fingers to shreds. On this side I have Canby, which is an ever bearing, and June bearing, and it is thornless. So I can feel a little rough texture on the cane, but it's not quite as thorny or pokey as the other ones. So there are some thornless varieties as well as thorny raspberries. And the berries themselves, slight difference in texture, flavor, as well as I mentioned, harvest and ripening times. Now, raspberries are not heavy feeders. One of the differences, we're talking about soil pH, for example, is that raspberries also are an easier, more average soil condition type plant. pH for them would be between like 5.5 and 6.5. And most like garden soils, most like our tomatoes and things, they're happy growing at about 6.5. So that could easily be your average raised bed or vegetable garden bed is going to be right in that pH range. They require well-draining soil. So raspberries are not going to be happy in a bed of heavy native clay that drains poorly. It would be wise to add some amendments such as our soil building conditioner to help wedge apart some of those clay particles and allow more air and moisture to move more freely through the soil. Another reason why raspberries are often grown in raised beds is because they've got better drainage and lighter soil in a raised bed. Now also in a raised bed you have more control over the ultimate spread of a raspberry patch so that it doesn't run and run and run. When it hits the ends of your raised bed, it can't necessarily spread any further. So if you're concerned about a caneberry taking over, or you don't think you'll do that regular pruning, you can put them into raised beds as well and kind of keep them controlled that way. Raspberries can be fed kind of as they're coming up in the spring. You see some new growth begin with an average like citrus and fruit tree fertilizer. This has a little bit extra available calcium as well as some magnesium, I believe, which helps give them a little kickstart. A decent amount of nitrogen without too much, so 842, again, organic, slow release. This can also, all of these fertilizer blends can also be made into liquid if you wanted to, feed them as a liquid or make a tea type brew out of that. So whether you feed granularly or liquid. And then again, come fall, another application of that wonderful kelp meal, which gives again that potassium that really helps kind of level out the stress of the plants that they receive through swings in heat and temperature and cold and extreme weather and winter conditions, as well as again strong cells, sturdy stems, those types of things. Now, in addition to the June bearing or the ever bearing, and I will show you a close-up to see, when you come to the garden center this time of year and you see that you have the opportunity to buy a pot with a stick in it for $17.99, really this is the faith of a gardener and truly believing in, the power of spring and that something's actually going to grow out of this. And a really faithful and imaginative gardener can already taste the raspberries from it. But a novice may look at this and say, well, how do I even know if it's alive? Well, of course, as we take it out of the soil, we would know by seeing some nice white active roots that the plant has broken dormancy. But if we look really closely, and it's kind of heavy, so I'm balancing, but if we look really closely, we see here behind my finger, this bud has just broken dormancy. And I have a little bit of tiny growth and another bud that's broken dormancy at the very top, the very start of a brand new leaf coming out. So what this plant will also do, though, in a short amount of time, is it's going to send a new cane directly from the soil to add to this overall appearance. And you can see where other canes have been in the soil that have been previously cut out. So this is how it works. This is our June bearing. This is our everbearing. So spring crop everbearing. This cane is the 2-year-old cane that we're looking at in most cases. And at the end of this year, it's going to be cut to the ground. The 2-year-old cane is known as a flora cane, just like flora is flowers. So this is a flowering cane that will give us flowers and produce fruit. The flora cane is the 2-year-old cane. When we eat and harvest off of this, we can go ahead and prune it down. The new cane that comes up out of the soil this year, on either one of these, will be known as the primo cane. The primo, the first. And the first year, the primo cane is like just growing, not necessarily making a flower. On the spring crop varieties, the primo cane will bloom the following spring in its second year, then ripen those fruits into late spring, early summer. Then again, we will cut the primo cane down, that flora cane down as new primo canes come up. So first year doesn't flower, second year flowers and fruits, cut it down, then the first year moves into year 2, and we have new ones coming up. So we're always refreshing ourselves, producing a flowering cane, cutting that back. An ever-bearing raspberry, the first year, the primo cane, is able to produce flowers and fruits late in the season. So late summer, it flowers and fruits as the later extension of its ripening period. That's the first year cane, is actually able to produce fruit on its first year, but at the end of that year. Then that ever-bearing same primo cane moves into year 2 as a flora cane. It produces its fruit in that earlier spring period. So the ever-bearing effect is, in essence, that the first year cane fruits late in the season and provides us with fruit on its first year, and then produces fruit again in spring of its second year. Still, at the end of year 2, they really are no longer productive, and they are pruned to the ground. So on this fabulous raspberry, another member of what's called the Bushel and Berry series, I think, is we have these half-high blueberries here I was talking about, Sunshine Blue, Bountiful Blue. They can be grown in containers, and so can this dwarf, thornless, ever-bearing raspberry called Raspberry Shortcake. It's not strawberry shortcake, so it's Raspberry Shortcake. This is a dwarf, as I mentioned, so it could be grown in containers. It's thornless, so you can hang out with it on your patio, and it's going to produce a ever-bearing style of crop production, giving you, again, a little bit over a longer period of time. Now, if we look at this one, we can see a ton of growth coming from the base, lots of brand new leaves pushing right up out of the ground. We also see growth beginning on the sticks that were from last year. And if we look closely at the sticks from last year, and you know what you're looking at the tip here, we have some little dangles. These little dangles, if you look closely, resemble what would have been last year's raspberries. So the end of the fruit, as the fruit fell off, that's kind of what held it on there. So we know, for example, that this particular stem gave us fruit last fall, summer, fall. So being that it's an ever-bearing plant, this would have been the primo cane developing into what this year is a flora cane. So it's going to flower and fruit for us in earlier spring this year. And all of these new bits that are coming up out of the soil, those will be this year's primo canes. And they will flower and produce for us in late season this year. So we'll be eating berries off of this spring. We'll be eating berries off of this late summer, fall. And again, when these are finished this season, we can cut those second-year-old ones down. Or you can just kind of, if you're more into a spring crop and you have a hard time kind of following which ones were which, you can always prune after the spring crop and just kind of forego that later summer crop. Usually it's a little bit less anyways, so more important is over time that you don't just like let your raspberry patch go wild and become, you know, a wild and crazy thicket. With that being said, I did not bring any bags of soil in today to show you, but again, you will see on your handout, talking about heavy clay, there has been research that shows that gypsum, rather than, we have dolomite lime usually that we sell for soil pH and adding calcium to your soils with dolomite lime, but gypsum, which is another gypsum lime, another form of lime, has also been shown to have positive effects on root rot in heavy clay soils when growing raspberries. So if you are working with a heavy clay soil base, adding some gypsum can definitely help with avoiding root rot if you don't have the option to go into raised beds or containers. Now, I don't know if I just got so excited about talking about Primo and Floricanes that I skipped over, but bushel and berry, this raspberry shortcake, can be grown in a container. So I wouldn't grow regular raspberries so much in containers, but large raised beds, that's great. This could be grown in a good sized pot, definitely could grow for years in a whiskey barrel, and the same again with these half highs like Sunshine Blue and Bountiful Blue. With that, I want to thank you all. I hope that this has been very educational, and I will answer any questions that come up that were unable to be answered earlier as the video finishes. Thanks again. Take care. Happy gardening.